It happened at 2:14 p.m., in the bright, expensive silence of my sister's conservatory. The air smelled of fresh lilies and cold entitlement. My 6-year-old son Noah was standing by the glass door wearing the thrift store sneakers I'd scrubbed clean that morning. My nephew Mason blocked his path. Mason is 13, wears designer hoodies that cost more than my monthly car insurance, and has the casual cruelty of a child who has never heard the word no. He looked down at Noah's feet, then at his own pristine Nikes. He didn't shout. He leaned in close enough that only Noah and I could hear and mouthed 4 words. Trash belongs outside. I froze. My eyes darted to the table. My sister Courtney smirked behind her coffee cup. My mother Susan adjusted her silk scarf and looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the garden. They heard, they saw, and they chose silence. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I stood up, took Noah's small, trembling hand, and walked out the front door without a word. 7 minutes later, as I was buckling Noah into his car seat, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. I expected an apology, maybe a scolding for leaving early. Instead, the screen read, "Monthly transfer today, you forgot." I stared at the words. She hadn't even mentioned the insult. I typed 2 words back, "Not my concern." And then I blocked her number. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I unlocked the door to my apartment and stepped into the quiet. It wasn't the kind of heavy, lonely silence my mother always warned me about, the kind she claimed I would die in if I didn't learn to be more agreeable. It was the silence of order, of safety. The air smelled like lemon polish and peace. Noah went straight to his room to play with his Legos. He didn't ask why we left early. He didn't ask why Grandma didn't say goodbye. He just adapted, because that's what the children of scapegoats learn to do. They learn to make themselves small so they don't get hit by the shrapnel. I walked to the kitchen island and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't pace the floor or call a friend to vent. I am a supply chain logistics manager. When a supply line is toxic, you don't cry about it. You secure the asset. I logged into my banking portal. The screen glowed blue in the dimming afternoon light, illuminating the transaction history that read like a diary of my own exploitation. Scheduled transfer, Susan Davis. $3,850. It was set to go out tomorrow on the 1st of the month. It was automatic, invisible, just like me. For 5 years, I had convinced myself that this money was charity. That I was a good daughter, helping her widowed mother survive. But as I stared at the cursor hovering over the cancel button, I finally saw the architecture of my family for what it really was. In construction, there is a concept called the load-bearing wall. It's the ugly, boring part of the house. It's hidden behind the drywall, covered in plaster, ignored by everyone admiring the crown molding and the chandeliers. You can't see it, so you forget it's there. You think the house stands up because of the pretty things, the expensive furniture, the art, the aesthetic. My sister Courtney was the chandelier. My mother was the crown molding, and I was the beam inside the wall, rotting under the weight of holding up a roof that didn't even cover me. They thought because they couldn't see me, I didn't matter. They thought they could drill holes in me, hang heavy pictures on me, and kick me when I got in the way. They forgot the one fundamental rule of structural engineering: if you remove the load-bearing wall, the penthouse collapses. Mason hadn't just insulted his cousin today, he had taken a sledgehammer to the only thing keeping his grandmother's lifestyle from caving in. I moved the mouse. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I felt the cold mechanical click of the trackpad. Transfer cancelled. I sat back in my chair. It was done. In about 24 hours, the notification would hit my mother's phone. She wouldn't panic immediately. She would assume it was a glitch. Then she would call. Then she would scream. But right now, the apartment was quiet. I looked at the balance in my savings account. It looked different now. It didn't look like a reservoir waiting to be drained by other people's emergencies. It looked like freedom. I walked over to the fridge and poured myself a glass of iced tea. My hands were perfectly steady. I wasn't a daughter who had just been disowned. I was an architect who had just initiated a controlled demolition. 3 years ago, my mother sold the family home. She said it was too much for her to manage alone. She bought a condo in the city and gave the rest of the equity to Courtney. "Courtney needs a forever home for Mason," she'd said, her voice wavering with practiced fragility. "You have your career, Natalie. You're self-sufficient. Courtney needs stability." So Courtney bought the Victorian house with the conservatory. The one where we were now required to attend mandatory Saturday brunch every week at 11 a.m. sharp. The conservatory was beautiful. It was glass and white wood filled with fiddle-leaf figs and expensive orchids that Courtney swore she kept alive herself, though I knew she hired a plant service. The table was always set with linen napkins and fresh pastries from the French bakery across town. It looked like a magazine spread. It felt like an operating theater. We weren't allowed to be messy in the conservatory. We weren't allowed to be loud, and we certainly weren't allowed to be poor. That morning, Noah had been excited to show Mason his drawing. He'd spent all week working on it, a picture of a superhero who fought bad guys with kindness. He'd colored the cape carefully, staying inside the lines. When we walked in, Mason was already seated at the head of the kids' table, playing on a Switch that cost $300. He was wearing a designer hoodie and brand new Jordan sneakers. He didn't look up when Noah said hello. Noah sat down and tried to show him the drawing. "Look, Mason." Mason glanced at the paper, then at Noah's feet. "Why are your shoes dirty?" Noah looked down. His sneakers were worn at the toes. They were clean, but they were old. I had meant to buy him new ones this month, but the transfer to Mom had come out of my account, and then the car insurance, and there just wasn't enough left. "They're my fast shoes," Noah whispered. "They're trash," Mason said, his voice flat and bored. "Trash belongs outside." I looked at Courtney. She was sipping her latte, scrolling on her phone. She heard him. I looked at Mom. She was adjusting a flower arrangement, humming to herself. "Susan," I said, my voice cutting through the hum. "Did you hear what he just said?" Mom sighed, a long suffering sound. She took a sip of her mimosa. "Oh, Natalie. Mason is just spirited. Boys will be boys. Don't be so sensitive. You're always looking for a fight." Looking for a fight. That was the narrative. I was the difficult one. The one who held grudges. The one who didn't understand that family is messy. But as I looked at Noah's face, the way his smile crumpled, the way he slowly pulled his drawing back and folded it until it was small enough to hide in his pocket, I realized something. This wasn't messy. It was precise. Mason wasn't just a spirited boy. He was a product. He was the result of a system where cruelty was rewarded with silence and kindness was punished with neglect. And I was the one paying for the electricity that kept the lights on in this torture chamber. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the tile floor. "We're leaving," I said. "Don't be dramatic," Courtney said, not looking up from her phone. "We haven't even had the quiche." "Enjoy it," I said. "It's on me, literally." I took Noah's hand and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked to my car, buckled my son in, and drove away from the beautiful glass house that I had helped build brick by invisible brick. The next morning my phone was quiet. Too quiet. That's how extinction bursts work. First, there is the shock. The disbelief that the lever you've pulled 1,000 times suddenly isn't dispensing the pellet. Then comes the rage. I was at work reviewing shipping manifests when the silence broke. I stared at it. For years, this name flashing on my screen had triggered a Pavlovian response, an instant spike of cortisol, a tightening in my chest. What does she need? What did I do wrong? How much will it cost to fix it? I didn't answer. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then a text. "Natalie, there must be a mistake with the bank. The transfer didn't go through. I need to buy groceries. Call me." Groceries. The classic guilt trip. She wasn't starving. Her fridge was full of organic produce and artisan cheeses, but she knew that the image of her a widow, alone hungry, was the one button she could always push. I didn't reply. I went back to my spreadsheet. 20 minutes later, the tone shifted. "Are you ignoring me? After everything I've done for you, this is incredibly selfish. Courtney says you left in a huff yesterday. Are you punishing me because Mason made a joke?" A joke. Calling my son trash was a joke. Then came Courtney. Her texts arrived in a rapid-fire staccato like bullets hitting a wall. "Mom is crying. She says you cut her off. What is wrong with you? You're ruining everything because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of Mason because he's actually going places. Fix this. Now." I set my phone face down on my desk. My hand hovered over it, trembling slightly. The urge to pick it up to apologize, to smooth it over, was a physical ache. It would be so easy. Just transfer the money. Just say sorry, technical glitch. Just buy the piece for another month. This is the sunk cost fallacy of love. You think because you've already paid so much in money, in dignity, in silence that you have to keep paying or everything you've invested is lost. But it wasn't just sunk cost, it was intermittent reinforcement. Psychologists use the term to explain gambling addiction. If a slot machine pays out every time you get bored, if it never pays out, you walk away. But if it pays out sometimes randomly, unpredictably, you get hooked. You keep pulling the lever hoping this time will be the jackpot. That was my mother. Most of the time she was critical, demanding, cold. But every once in a while, maybe once a year, she would give me a crumb, a compliment on a promotion, a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long, a whisper of, "You're the strong one, Natalie. I don't know what I'd do without you." And I would starve myself for months just to taste that crumb again. I looked at the black screen of my phone. The notifications were stacking up like bricks in a wall I was finally building. I wasn't weak for staying this long. I was addicted to a game that was rigged against me. I was playing a slot machine that was programmed never to let me win, only to keep me playing until I was bankrupt. My coworker David walked by. I looked up. The office was humming with the low, steady noise of productivity. Normal people doing normal jobs, not being held hostage by their own families. "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a lie. I just closed a very expensive account. I picked up my phone not to answer but to silence it completely. The game was over. I had walked out of the casino. I treated the situation exactly as I would a supply chain disruption at work. When a vendor fails to deliver and refuses to negotiate, you don't send them angry texts. You conduct a forensic audit, you compile the data, and you present the findings to the shareholders. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I named it Family Solvency Project. For the next 3 hours, the only sound in my apartment was the clicking of keys. I pulled bank statements going back 5 years. I downloaded Venmo histories. I found the receipts for the loans that were never repaid, the emergencies that coincided with designer handbag releases, and the co-signed leases. It was staggering. When you look at the numbers day by day, they look like love. $100 here for groceries, $500 there for a car repair. But when you aggregate the data, it looks like embezzlement. I categorized every expense. Category A, housing assistance. Category B, lifestyle maintenance. Category C, the Courtney tax money given to Mom that mysteriously appeared as new gifts for Mason. I summed the columns. The total at the bottom of the sheet stared back at me in bold black Arial font. $231,450. That was the price of my membership in this family, and they had just revoked my access card. I opened my email client. I didn't just add Mom and Courtney to the recipient list. I added Aunt Linda. I added Uncle Robert. I added the cousins who liked to comment family first on Courtney's Instagram posts. If they wanted to have an opinion on my finances, they deserved to see the balance sheet. Subject: financial support termination and budgetary analysis. 2019 to present. I didn't write a long emotional letter. I wrote a memo. Please find attached a comprehensive record of all financial transfers provided to Susan Davis over the last 60 months. As of today, the total support provided is $231,000. Effective immediately, all voluntary subsidies are ceased. Then I added the second part, the part that would really hurt. I had run the numbers on Mom's actual income, her Social Security, and her pension from Dad. Then I calculated her necessary expenses: rent, utilities, basic food insurance. I typed out the analysis. Current monthly income $2,400. Required monthly expenses $2,385. I highlighted the final line. Projected monthly surplus $15. It was tight. It was harsh, but it was mathematically possible. She wouldn't starve, she wouldn't be homeless, but the mimosa budget zero, the organic flower delivery service zero, the aesthetic gone. She would have to live like the rest of us. She would have to budget. I looked at the cursor hovering over the send button. My hands weren't shaking anymore. In logistics, we talk about right-sizing an operation. It's a polite way of saying you cut the dead weight to save the ship. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was right-sizing my mother. I clicked send. The swoosh sound of the email departing felt heavier than usual. It was the sound of a bridge burning, but the fire was beautiful. It was clean. I closed my laptop. I didn't wait for the fallout. I knew it would take them at least an hour to read the attachments, to process the sheer volume of the data, to realize that I had kept receipts for everything. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. For the first time in 5 years, my bank account belonged entirely to me. I had just given myself a $3,850 a month raise. But the ledger wasn't closed yet. There was one line item in the spreadsheet that hadn't made sense. One recurring withdrawal from a joint account I had set up with Mom years ago for medical emergencies. I went back to my desk. I needed to verify one last thing. The spreadsheet was clean, but one anomaly kept nagging me. It was like a discrepancy in a shipping manifest, small enough to ignore, but significant enough to sink a container ship if you weren't careful. When I'd set up the financial support system for Mom, I'd created a joint emergency fund account. It was supposed to be a buffer for things like sudden dental work or a broken furnace. I'd seeded it with $5,000 and contributed a small amount automatically each month. I rarely checked it because Mom claimed she never touched it unless it was life or death. I logged into that specific account now. The balance was lower than it should have been. Much lower. I scrolled through the transaction history. Withdrawal $2,000. August 15th. Withdrawal $2,000. September 15th. Withdrawal $2,000. October 15th. It was a pattern. Every month on the 15th, $2,000 was pulled from the account. The transaction description was vague. ACH, transfer, P.S., education. P.S., education. My mind raced. Mom didn't take classes. She didn't have student loans. Was it a scam? Was someone exploiting her? For a brief, naive second, I felt a flicker of worry. Maybe she was a victim. Maybe I'd been too harsh. I clicked on the transaction details to see the full recipient name. The bank's interface expanded the line item. ACH, transfer, P.S. education, St. Jude's Preparatory School. I froze. St. Jude's, the elite private school across town. The one with the equestrian program and the Latin requirement. The one where Mason went to school. The air in my apartment seemed to drop 10 degrees. I pulled up the school's website. I found the tuition page. Monthly installment plan, $1,985. With fees it rounded up perfectly to $2,000. I sat back, the blood draining from my face. Mom wasn't spending my money on medical bills. She wasn't even spending it on organic groceries or mimosas. She was laundering it. She was taking the money. I sent her money I earned working 60-hour weeks, money I sacrificed my own son's needs to provide, and she was funneling it directly to Courtney. She was paying for Mason's tuition. I had been paying for the education of the boy who called my son trash. I looked at Noah's shoes by the door. The Velcro was peeling. The soles were worn smooth. I hadn't bought him new ones because I thought Mom needed the money for her blood pressure medication. Meanwhile, Mason was getting a $24,000 a year education on my dime. The rage that hit me wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold that burns. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I picked up my phone and called the bank. I need to report unauthorized activity on a joint account, I told the representative, my voice steady as stone. And I need to close it immediately. Certainly, ma'am. We can freeze the funds now. Do it, I said. And mark the last 6 transfers as disputed. I did not authorize those payments. It was the nuclear option. Disputing the transfers would trigger an investigation. The bank would claw back the money from the school. The school would demand payment from Courtney. Courtney wouldn't have it. Mason wouldn't just be embarrassed. He would be expelled. I hung up the phone. Then I printed the transaction history. I highlighted the St. Jude's line items in yellow. I put the paper in an envelope. I wasn't just cutting them off anymore. I was auditing the entire operation. I walked into the living room and sat on the floor next to Noah. He was building a tower out of blocks. It was tall, precarious, but he was placing each piece with such care. "What are you building, bud?" I asked. "A castle," he said. "For us. No mean people allowed." I kissed the top of his head. "That's a good rule," I whispered. "No mean people allowed." The fallout wouldn't take long now. The tuition payment was due in 3 days. When the check bounced, and it would bounce hard, the house of cards would come down. I waited. It took 3 days for the system to crash. It started with a voicemail from the school bursar, which Courtney frantically forwarded to me, probably by mistake in her panic. Then came the emails from the bank about the chargeback investigation. Then came the knock. It was 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Noah was already in his pajamas watching a movie. I saw them through the peephole before I opened the door. They looked like refugees from a lifestyle magazine that had gone out of business. Courtney's hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy bun that wasn't stylish, just messy. Susan was wearing a raincoat over her pajamas. They looked small. They looked desperate. I opened the door, but I didn't step back. I filled the frame. Natalie, Mom breathed, her voice trembling. Thank God. You have to stop this. The bank, they took the money back. Mason's school called. They said he can't come back tomorrow until the balance is paid. I know, I said. Courtney pushed forward, her eyes red-rimmed. How could you? You knew that money was for him. You knew we were counting on it. I knew, I repeated calmly. I knew you were stealing from me to pay for a luxury education for a boy who called my son trash. He's a child, Courtney screamed. He didn't mean it. He meant it because he learned it from you, I said. He learned that I am an ATM, not a person. He learned that Noah is less than him because his shoes are dirty. Well, now you know why his shoes were dirty, Courtney. Because I was buying your son's Latin textbooks. I held out the envelope I had prepared. The printout of the transaction history. The highlighted lines showing every dollar siphoned away from my life into theirs. Here, I said. This is the final statement. It's not an invoice, it's a receipt for the lesson I just taught you. Mom reached for my hand, tears streaming down her face. Please, Natalie. We'll lose everything. The school, the reputation. People will talk. Let them talk, I said. I looked at them one last time. I didn't feel the old tug of guilt. I didn't feel the need to fix it. I felt the profound, quiet relief of someone who has finally put down a heavy load. Goodbye, I said. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Click. The sound was final. I turned around. The apartment was warm. The movie was playing softly. Noah looked up from the couch. Who was that, Mommy? Nobody, baby, I said. Just the wind. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the box of frozen pizza. It was the cheap kind, the store brand. I put it in the oven. 20 minutes later, we were sitting on the living room floor on a picnic blanket I'd laid out. We ate pizza straight from the cardboard box. There were no linen napkins, no fresh flowers, no rules about elbows on the table. We laughed. We made a mess. Noah told me a long, rambling story about a dragon who liked to eat tacos. I looked around my small, imperfect living room. I thought about the money I would save. I thought about the house I would eventually buy, a house with a yard for Noah paid for with my own money, protected by my own boundaries. But more than that, I thought about the silence of my phone. I had blocked them all. The notifications had stopped. The demands had ceased. This was the peace of zero. It wasn't just about having zero debt or zero obligations to them. It was the joy of missing out on their drama. It was the wealth of zero toxicity. I looked at Noah, his face smeared with tomato sauce, happy and safe. Mommy, he asked, are we rich? I smiled, and for the first time in my life I knew the answer. Yes, baby, I said. We have everything we need. If you've ever had to become the villain in their story just to survive yours, share this video. And tell me in the comments, what was the one thing that finally made you walk away?